Russia strikes Kyiv with missiles and drones. Officials report at least 27 dead. Overnight into July 2nd, 2026, Russia launched one of the largest aerial attacks of the war on Kyiv, firing dozens of missiles and roughly 500 drones at Ukraine's capital. Ukrainian officials said most were shot down, but ballistic missiles and drones that got through hit dozens of sites, collapsing part of a 9-story apartment building and damaging every district of the city. Casualty counts rose through the day as rescuers dug through rubble. Early figures ranged from 17 to 22 dead, and later reports reached 27 to 30 dead, with more than 90 to 130 injured. Kyiv's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, declared July 3rd a day of mourning. Across every account, a few facts are not in dispute. Russia carried out a large-scale missile and drone attack on Kyiv overnight into July 2nd, one Ukrainian officials called among the largest strikes on the capital in the whole war. Ukraine's Air Force reported 74 missiles, 28 of them ballistic, plus 496 drones, with most intercepted but 25 ballistic missiles and 12 drones getting through to hit 33 locations. Part of a 9-story residential building in the Darnitsky district collapsed, trapping people inside, and every district of Kyiv reported damage. Russia's defense ministry stated the strike targeted military, industrial, and fuel energy facilities and was a response to recent Ukrainian long-range strikes. In the days before the attack, Ukraine had indeed been striking Russian oil refineries, taking a significant share of Russian refining capacity offline, and a NATO summit was already scheduled for the following week in Ankara, Turkey, with Ukraine aid and air defense on the agenda. Underneath the day's headline sits a harder structural reality. Both sides are locked in a strike-for-strike cycle. Ukraine hits Russian refineries to cut Moscow's fuel and revenue, and Russia answers with mass strikes on Ukrainian cities and energy infrastructure, each attack partly a response to the last, regardless of how either side narrates it. The NATO summit sets a hard deadline both Kyiv and Moscow are trying to shape: Ukraine to extract air defense and sanctions commitments, Russia to deepen Western war weariness and doubt about American resolve, and Ukraine's ability to protect its cities depends on a finite supply of interceptors, especially the American-made Patriot PAC-2 and PAC-3 missiles that Washington controls, making U.S. decisions a structural choke point independent of anyone's rhetoric. The clearest material reality is this: a large Russian barrage killed civilians and destroyed housing in Kyiv, while Ukraine's own strikes have simultaneously taken a substantial share of Russian oil refining capacity offline, imposing real economic costs on Moscow. Both of those things are true at once. Each side tells this story in its own strongest terms. Ukraine's government argues Russia deliberately struck homes and civilians, with most of the damage hitting residential buildings, making faster Western air defense an absolute and critical priority and justifying tougher sanctions. Its incentive is to convert a visible atrocity into concrete commitments at the NATO summit while sustaining domestic and allied resolve. The impact on Ukraine is direct: civilian deaths, destroyed housing, and strained air defenses, but also leverage to frame the war as a matter of national survival. Russia's government casts the barrage as a precision strike on military, industrial, and energy facilities, in direct retaliation for Ukraine's long-range attacks that caused fuel shortages and embarrassed Moscow, presenting itself as responding proportionally to Ukrainian escalation rather than initiating terror against civilians. Its incentive is to deter and punish Ukraine's refinery campaign, demonstrate it can still strike the capital at will, and push Western debate toward war weariness ahead of the summit. The ongoing degradation of Russia's oil refining capacity from Ukrainian strikes creates real economic and domestic pressure on Moscow, which this strike is partly meant to answer. The United States, under the Trump administration, blends pressure and diplomacy. It points to sanctions on Russian oil companies and Ukraine's refinery strikes as squeezing Putin, and to earlier Trump-Putin arrangements, including a past temporary pause on strikes on Kyiv, as evidence its approach can move Moscow while resisting open-ended new commitments. Its incentive is to end the war on terms it can call a deal, avoid deeper funding or escalation, and manage domestic skepticism about Ukraine aid while retaining leverage over both sides. It now faces intensified pressure at the NATO summit to release air defense interceptors and back new sanctions, and its choices materially shape Ukraine's ability to defend its cities. European NATO allies frame the strike as proof Russia will not negotiate in good faith, arguing each attack on civilians should trigger more sanctions and that allies must accelerate air defense given uncertainty about American commitment. Poland scrambled jets and Finland restricted its airspace in response. Their incentive is to keep the United States engaged, deter spillover, and present a united front at the Ankara summit. They bear much of the frontline security risk and sanctions cost, with domestic politics increasingly turning on how much of the burden shifts from Washington to Europe. Finally, a brief note on how the coverage itself splits. Outlets aligned with the American right, like Fox News, led with the sheer scale of the attack. Separately, right-leaning opinion writing, some of it written weeks before this strike, has argued that sanctions and Ukraine's refinery campaign are squeezing Putin, though that argument mostly wasn't written as a direct response to this attack. American center-left outlets such as CNN and PBS led with the civilian death toll and pressure on Washington for more aid, with PBS notably naming both the Russian strike and Ukraine's oil sector strikes in the same headline. Non-Western coverage, including Al Jazeera and Gulf outlet The National, centered the humanitarian toll and European sanctions threats while giving space to Russia's claim that it hit military targets, framing the story more around escalation risk than blame. And anti-NATO left commentary, such as the World Socialist website, reframed the story away from the strike itself and toward blaming NATO and European powers for driving escalation. The most independently verifiable facts, mass civilian harm in Kyiv and significant real damage to Russian oil refining, cut across every one of these frames. Want the whole story, every side with the sources? It's all at pressureoftruth.com.